and I heard pow, 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 and it stopped, and I went, that's so weird. So I got up in my pajamas, go over to the balcony. My neighbors were underneath me. I said, did y'all hear that? And they said, yeah. I said, I don't think that was a car or firecrackers. That sounded like gunshots. So then we saw people running. I was like, oh my God, that's an active shooter. So I wasn't in my head at that moment. I'm thinking, I'm not going anywhere. Okay. But then I saw people settle down and go back, and I heard the uncle go, ah! He was screaming, ah! So I'm thinking that's the victim. That's the person who shot. It sounded like a cry of agony. It was a cry of agony, but emotional, not physical. And they were crying out for, so then they're coming out looking for the ambulance. Where's the ambulance? Somebody help! So then they're looking for help, and they're going towards where the shooting was. So I'm thinking, okay, scene is safe. Somebody's hurt. Man down. I got things that could help. I'm an infusion nurse. I have a whole trunk full of stuff, right? But threw on some clothes, got my stuff out of my trunk, and ran over there. And you can hear my voice in the video. I'm a nurse. No, I'm a nurse. Because I wanted to let them know. So I started saying that from the bottom floor. And they said, take the elevator. So I came up the elevator. And they started pulling on me, like, to come quickly. And that's when I was like, no. Like, leave me alone. Because I was like this, too. I was scared. But I had to go. Because if somebody was shot in the leg, in the arm, somewheres where maybe they don't have the tourniquet on right. Maybe he finally does collapse and they don't know how to do CPR the correct way. I mean, for minutes, I could at least do that. And not only am I risking that, but legally I am not protected in the state of Texas.
And when you...
For a Good Samaritan Act. So, because I am a nurse. So when I got there, I looked at him. His head was this way and up, and his eyes were rolled back and fixed. And I saw a pile of blood behind his head. I didn't see where the gun was shot. I've stopped for car accidents before. I never move the patient. Rule number 1, don't touch him. Because if it was something in his neck that could have been taken care of, I don't want to move his neck. And then he's paralyzed, then I'm in trouble, right? No, don't move it.
People on social media are saying, why didn't you do CPR and this kind of thing? That would not be appropriate?
That would not be appropriate, especially with a gunshot wound. You would never do CPR because you would be circulating the blood, and the blood would go right out of the hole. So the first thing to do is to put pressure on the wound. That was too late. I checked his pulse. Plus, it was probably, I heard it 2:30ish or so. I was back calling my daughter. The phone call was at 3:16 in the morning. It's on my phone. 3:16 is when I called her. So I was already back, shook up. And when I called her, it was more like, ah! And she's like, Mom, so are you okay? Slow down. Because she's a nurse too. And so I'm calling her. I'm like, oh my God.
Did you know who he was?
No clue. It was my 28-year-old girlfriend that's a nurse that said, Jody, do you know who that is? And I'm like, who? No clue. He was a human being. That's it.
Talk a little bit more about what you just said. You said you were scared, but you had to go.
Because I heard somebody crying out for help. And I thought at least I could get them stabilized or just sit there with them until the EMS got there. I've stopped for like car accidents and stuff before. I don't move them out of the vehicle, but I'll hold their hand. One of the ladies, I went and got her child out of school. I took the child to the hospital. I could be helpful in other ways. I don't have to, and make sure EMS is getting there. So if CPR did need to be started, absolutely got started. I might get in trouble, but
when you realized it was too late, you saw what you saw, and then the ambulance came. Did you stay for that? And then what happened after that? Because I know once,
I didn't stay for the ambulance, but they were there. I heard they were there, so I left the scene. I was pretty shaken up. I checked his pulse. I checked the carotid pulse. I checked it on here. I checked again.
You knew he was
I can't pronounce someone dead, but I think he was deceased, probably. Assumptions are made. This is an assumption on impact, probably. didn't take long.
And you mentioned you've been doing this almost 30 years. You've never seen this type of trauma in person?
No. I mean, I've handled emergent situations, but I've never I'm not an ER nurse, so no gunshot wound kind of thing. Patients bleeding out, yeah, I've for different reasons, post-surgery, that kind of thing, yeah, I've handled those situations.
Can you recall what it was like around you while you were trying to assist him with other
The uncle was very distraught. I mean, after I told him, I said, no. And I started crying, and he grabbed me, and he's like, please. And I started bawling, and I was like, then I came back across the street, my neighbors were out, and I was crying, and I'm like, typical nurse, I was beating myself up. I should have gone sooner. What if I would have been 5 minutes sooner? Sorry.
What would you say to people questioning your actions or anything?
I don't really care.
Did you see the other people who were shot as well?
They were already gone. All I know is he's a 28-year-old male, and that's my son over there, and somebody is his mother.
What do you think, living in the vicinity and presumably having gone to businesses there, maybe even this one, what is your just general thoughts about that happening there?
I feel safe. I've been in the area a couple of years, and I feel completely safe down here. And I don't feel unsafe because of this incident, because it was isolated, and it was people that aren't from here. They were visiting. Not to say that our people in Houston wouldn't do it, but and there's a huge police presence down here and video cameras everywhere. So people that live downtown, even the homeless, they know not to start doing stuff because you'll be caught. You will be caught. So I never see people doing drugs on the side of the street. I never see anybody getting purse napped. Nothing ever. I've never even seen a fight in the street downtown. So, and just that day, I was telling my friends, downtown is safe. There's never any gunshots or anything. And then at night, I'm like, well, crap, I'll never say that again.
You said earlier, you've been keeping up with this pretty diligently. Knowing what you know and you being a part of the initial response, I mean, how do you feel about the way it's been playing out so far? Knowing that there isn't any suspects, knowing that there hasn't been any arrests.
It's going to happen. They'll find them. There's video of somebody's going to come forward. They're probably, I would assume they already have. I think plus like who was saying the video. There's videos everywhere. Every building in that area. I'm very familiar with that area in Green Street. There are cameras everywhere.
And getting people to cooperate is another issue for police. What would you say to anyone who may know who this is? The gunman, that is.
Would they cooperate?
They're not cooperating with police. Police are having a hard time getting people to talk. What would you say to those people?
I would ask them to come forward. Mainly for the family. Like, if this was your child or your brother or your sister, your uncle or your cousin or whoever, you would want to know. Like, even me, just for the minuscule trauma that I have from this, because this is not my son, but it still hurts me that it's somebody's son. I would want to, and I'm digging for answers. That's why I'm looking. I want to know. I don't know why that's going to be healing for me, but I want to know. Like, I want to know why. Like, why? I don't care of his fame. I don't care who he was. Like, it's just, there's too much of this going on. People just, reach for a gun and that's it. It's like total disregard for human life. So in my heart and soul, that bothers me. It's just the human being on the planet that, he could have been hiding. The shooter could have been hiding, and as soon as I pressed the button, he could have been on the elevator and came out, pow, pow, right there with me. So that's why I was like this when I literally was like this, and I could feel my heart beating like it was in my throat. And when I was getting all my stuff there, I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what am I doing? You know, in my head, I'm going through the process like, you are crazy right now. What are you doing?
Why'd you want to even share anything with us?
I was hesitant. My son is the one who defended me kind of on Twitter, and then TMZ called out, and I was like, oh, I don't know. I want people to know that there's good people. In a bad situation, there was some piece of goodness there. Does that make sense? Like we see stuff on TV like every day. It's too much. Sorry, it's too much sometimes. I mean, we're just like barely a year out of COVID, and the world is not the same. And I just want something good to come out of this. Somebody to know that good people sometimes show up just because, you know?
You talked about it briefly, but something that we
Sorry.
want to talk about.
No,
Okay.
please don't
No,
apologize.
I'm fine.
This is the emotion that I think will help kind of keep this story going, make people kind of start. It's still a shock for everybody, but I think when you are natural like this, it helps people to kind of connect the dots and then help solve the case. Sorry.
That's okay. I was just gonna mention, I mean, you talked about something a lot of people don't talk about enough, and that's trauma that's associated with things like this. You having all this experience in the field, but never experiencing it like this, how are you dealing with it?
God. That's the only thing that had me go over there. My faith is bigger than this world. My son is still alive. I still have a son. I almost lost him before, and I just can't imagine this mom. You know, I'm a mother, so I've always been fearful that this could be my kid one day. Wrong place, wrong time. Trouble. Which is now he knows why he should call me if you say you're gonna show up and you don't, now you know why I freak out. Yeah.
That was. I think.
I'm fine.
Yeah. We
Thank you
appreciate
so
you doing
much
that.
for-
One quick point of clarification. From the time that you heard the gunshots to the time, I know that you threw on clothes, you went downstairs, you grabbed your bag, and then you worked your way into the scene. How long do you think it was between the time that you heard the gunshots and the time you actually got to the now deceased?
I don't know for sure. Time is like, I
5
just know
minutes, 10 minutes?
it probably would have been max 10, 15.
How do you know it was his uncle? Did he say this is my nephew? Or?
I only know that after the fact, because I had no idea who these people were. They were all just people to me. Everybody there. I knew nothing about why they were there. I knew nothing about who they were with. I didn't know these people were famous. I didn't know if they were gang members. That's
And
the
even
other-
after the fact, you didn't know. You weren't familiar with
After
him.
the fact, I still didn't know. When I came home, I got on the phone 3:16 in the morning with my daughter because I was shook up, trying to tell her on the phone what I just witnessed, and she didn't even know. My daughter's 26, but the next morning I got a text from her and my friend who's 28. Do you know who that is? I'm like, who? They're like, he's like the new young people's P. Diddy, and I don't know who P. Diddy is. So I was like, really? Like, that's big. Okay, wait.
Is that true?
Okay, wow.
I mean,
I can see
Kinda,
that conversation.
sorta.
He's probably
He was
one
up
of
and
the,
coming.
He's not-
pretty
No,
huge.
they
They
were
were
already
there.
They were there. They were the biggest rap
Number
trio
one.
They were
of this
pretty
generation.
In fact, their height was what probably. I mean, their
Their
peak.
peak was
Oh,
maybe
they were-
like
they're-
a,
It was a few
Yeah.
years ago before they broke apart.
Yeah, and this guy in particular was really coming of his own.
and he was the chill one.
He was the one that was always underrated, but he was actually one of the best performing ones. So
I watched
so
his videos just to
so
see
now
him alive.
it's you know
or, you know?
it's even a bigger deal.
Yeah.
So wait, Bill, just
To
to
me,
clarify.
he's a kid. I mean, I'm a 57-year-old
Sure.
woman, so he could be my child. You know, he's a kid. He looked like a kid.
Yeah, he looked young.
He
Younger
looked
than
very
his age,
young.
even.
I thought he was about 22, 24.
Yeah.
Not that 28 makes any difference to lose your life over something so stupid.
Did the man who was screaming say later on ever say like that was my nephew? How did you find out?
All the uncle nephew stuff, anything about them was after reading stuff on Twitter.
Ah, okay, got it.
So when they told me who he was, they go look on Twitter. And so the only reason why even TMZ found is because people were talking shade about the nurse. You can hear my voice. I'm a nurse. And he said, that's my mom. He's protecting me.
I'd be willing to bet some of those same people would have had their phones out instead of trying to help
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
for
Exactly
sure.
what I said.
I didn't even have my phone with me.
Yeah. Okay. Clarification.
Yeah.
What did you have in your bag when you got there? Like, what did you bring with you?
Medical supplies, because I do whatever I had. I have stuff to start an IV.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm an
Bandages.
infusion nurse. Yeah, I have a first aid kit. I have a blood pressure. I have a stethoscope. I have everything.
Okay.
Because I have to have everything. I'm on the road. I got to take my clinic with me.
It's like your go bag.
It's my go bag. Yeah, so I grabbed that and some supplies and yeah. Because that was my thinking when I heard him and who I thought was the victim in agony. Even though in my head I'm going, oh my God, I'm like, I could not have lived with myself if I knew I had the equipment to save his life and I didn't act on it. If I would have found out the next day that boy bled to death because EMS took too long, I would be more devastated than I am right now.
Do you recall hearing ambulance's arrival?
No.
Just everything.
All of
just-
that is a blur.
Mhm.
The only thing I remember from that night was the uncle, and I will never forget his face.